Yes, we are live. I know folks get a little confused and sometimes like, are you guys going to be live? Because they hear the rebroadcast prior to us coming on. So this is the live version to make you think. It is March 18th, 2023, and it is 7 a.m. and we are live in studio. In fact, Dr. Bradley is off today, so he's on a well-deserved little hiatus there. So good morning, Dr. Bradley and Mrs. Erica Bradley. Enjoy your day off there, sir. We're going to try to keep things going here. And I want to say good morning, Pastor Hobbs. How are you, sir?
By the grace of God, I'm well. Thank you. How are you, sir?
Good. Not it's Friday. It's Saturday. You know, it's a St. Patrick's Day weekend. A lot of celebrating going on in the city. Yeah. All of us in law enforcement will be participating in some way tomorrow. I just told Pastor Hobbs. Yeah, it's a full call out, so we'll be there tomorrow as well. If you want to join us in the conversation this morning, the calling number here is 617-282-0685, 617-282-0685. And we want to thank our sponsor, Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company. For all your mortgage needs, give branch manager Cora Holbrook a call at area code 781-342-0252. Guaranteed Mortgage is located at 75 State Street in downtown Boston, Mass. Guarantee Rate Mortgage Company, guaranteed to exceed your expectation. So, Pastor Hobbs, like I said, you know, as we always do before we get into the broadcast, is offer prayer. And if you would be so kind, sir.
Absolutely. It'd be my pleasure. Father God, we do bless you. We honor you. We give you praise. We give you glory for this day that you've made. And we choose to rejoice and be glad. And we ask you just to bless this day, bless this broadcast, bless all that's said and done, that you're glorified in and through it. And we're careful to give you the praise and the glory. We count it as done. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So, like I said, 7 o'clock out here, we're going to talk about what's going on with our schools there. As a matter of fact, in Houston now, in Houston, Texas, the governor is wants to take over the school system there. I know there was a threat here in Massachusetts, and the state is overseeing things going on in the city. They haven't completely taken it over yet, but that was the plan. I know Rhode Island was taken over at one point, and they just get out of that. But also the big debate about whether or not they should have school resource officers in the schools, and there's some debate going on about that. So we're going to get into that. But also before we do that, we want to say a hearty good morning to Mr. and Mrs. Harry Scales, avid listeners out there. I want to thank that brother and Mrs. Scales for their continued support of the broadcast here. Also, good morning to Mr. Rhodes Pierre, another avid listener out there, and Ditka, brother Jamal Crawford, as well. And I want to say a good morning to our sister Denise Reed out there as well, and our brother Bridgeforth down in Indiana, Gary, Indiana. Always makes you think about the Jackson 5. Gary, Indiana, here we come. Maybe that's what Dr. Bradley is. I think he's in our nation's capital, as I talked to him the other day. So I said good morning to Dr. Bradley as well. So like I said, there's a lot going on in the city. The big thing is that what concerns me, amongst a lot of other things, is the education piece that is taking place, and then some folks will say not taking place in our schools. And I am a firm believer that if you don't have a safe environment, you don't have a learning environment. And you know, we have schools in every other part of the country, suburban towns, and the common denominator I find is that they're not bogged down with the public safety piece of it. So if we don't get that under control, in my humble opinion, it's not much learning that's going to be taking place. So I was listening to this interesting piece on NPR Here and Now yesterday, and Pastor Hobbs is going to play that when he has it queued up. And the debate on whether or not we should have school resource officers, SROs, back in the school. Some folks who were on the fence about it, who were against it. Now, in fact, Washington, D.C., they had voted to remove them, and now the mayor is saying not so fast. We're seeing the spike in it. We're also seeing it here. You know, they removed the school police officers here in the city of Boston, and we've seen an increase in violence in the schools. And those may not want to equate it to not having that oversight, but there is definitely a connection there. So we'll listen to this piece and we'll talk about it on the other side.
Support for Here and Now comes from BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy. Clients are matched with one of 25,000 therapists and can communicate via video, chat, or phone at betterhelp.com/public.
There's a big debate in this country over police officers in schools. Do they belong there? Do they not? The District of Columbia is reducing the number of its so-called school resource officers, but now some city leaders are reconsidering. Martin Ostermule of member station WAMU reports.
Officer Tracy Taylor has been with the district's Metropolitan Police Department for more than 30 years. And for the last 10 of them, he served as a school resource officer at Eastern High School on Capitol Hill.
I know most of the kids out there, they don't even call me Officer Taylor anymore. They say Uncle Tracy.
Kind of.
But these days, Tracy finds himself at
Bailing out.
Eastern less and less.
Because of what's going on with DC Council not
Rich
wanting
positors.
us. Right now, it's very difficult for us to be in the building like we used to be.
Taylor is referring to a decision made by the DC City Council 2 years ago to start taking police officers out of DC schools. There used to be more than 100 officers around the city. The division is now down to less than half that. By 2025, they'll all be gone.
The council's going to do what they do, but they're going to be held accountable if something happens in these buildings, and they're going to be saying, okay, well, where were the SROs? Well, you got rid of them.
The council's decision came in the wake of George Floyd's murder by police officers in 2020, an event that spurred nationwide protests and new debates over systemic racism and policing in America. Locally, elected officials proposed a range of changes, including body cameras and stricter oversight. And some neighboring jurisdictions, including Alexandria, Virginia, and Montgomery County, Maryland, initially chose to pull police officers out of schools.
A lot of the kids who go to my school, me included, have dealt with harassment from police officers, like just from walking on the streets.
Sam Maria Short is 17 and attends Eastern High School. She was in favor of taking police out of DC schools.
Having them being allowed in a place where we're supposed to feel safe and comfortable to learn is very triggering. One day they might be nice, but then the next day they might flip out on you or something. Like, you never know.
But a lot has changed in the last 2 years. A spike in crime in many cities has left local leaders concerned. In Pomona, California, police officers were pulled out of schools only to be returned months later after a shooting incident. Officials in Boston are also debating what the future of school resource officers might be. In the District of Columbia, Mayor Muriel Bowser opposed the council's decision to do away with school resource officers, and in January said she plans to double down on her efforts to keep them in place. That's a relief for Katrina Shelby, the principal of Kramer Middle School in Southeast DC. She says her school resource officer is around less than before, and that can mean she has to call a patrol officer if a problem breaks out. Shelby says SROs are simply better equipped to handle kids.
He knows their temperaments. He knows the things that are happening with them outside of school and in school. And if we're having an issue with a student who needs support, he's going to come in from a supportive angle.
But for Gabrielle DuBose, the problem comes down to culture. She's a teacher at Duke Ellington School of the Arts and attended DC public schools herself. She remembers the officer-friendly program, which brought police into elementary schools. But that was decades ago, and she doesn't think the new generation of police have the same approach.
That whole officer-friendly mantra has morphed into law and order. You got to keep law and order, and so there are those police officers who have that mindset, and they're not going to move from that.
DuBose says more resources should be put into school counselors and mental health supports. For Catrice Fuller-Whitaker, the issue is complicated. She works at a DC charter school and says she's seen the good and bad of having armed police in the building. But she says there is a middle ground.
Let's humanize them in a sense. So we never want them in uniforms. We never want them with any of their weapons and things on campus. And we're not going to just have them present when something negative is happening.
Back at Eastern High School, Officer Taylor says he's going to keep doing his job as long as he can.
It takes a village with these children, and I'm just part of the village.
But whether he remains in the village is likely to be debated later this spring, when Mayor Bowser and some lawmakers plan to revisit the council's decision to pull police out of schools. For Here and Now, I'm Martin Ostermule.
All right, so there you have it. The big debate on whether or not there should have school resource officers in the schools. I think, during the George Floyd era, some folks saw it as an opportunity to remove school resource officers from their buildings. Even when these things were working, even when they had a partnership, even when it was beneficial to them. And we're seeing the repercussions of that. I know we're seeing it here in Boston as well. Boston police don't have all the resources, the personnel. And for full disclosure, Boston police were never in schools. And in the city of Boston, Boston Public Schools had their own school police officers who are now school safety service personnel who don't have police powers And some people say they're just not bystanders, someone who can call the police if something is happening, but they're not effective in the way that they used to be, able to write police reports and make arrests when needed. And there are times, unfortunately, when incidents take place in school buildings where, just like people say, in domestic situations, domestic violence situations, the preferred method is arrest. And sometimes if there's a student in the school with a gun, if there was a student who has caused some really horrendous harm, stabbings and things of that nature, that it is up to someone in the black robe to decide what the course of action is with their behavior. And I think that's where people get conflicted is, yes, the police officers that are in these schools, the SROs, are there and 99% of the time are able to deal with these problems outside of arrest, outside of any type of court action. For full disclosure, I work in that environment. But there are times when that's above my pay grade. And we also have to balance safety in the schools for the students, for the staff, for the community. I attend meeting after meeting after meeting. In fact, I was at one yesterday in which the biggest problem that people were talking about were teenage school students who were in libraries and businesses in the community, just causing havoc. And how do we deal with that? I get it. People want to strike a balance, and I can honestly say most law enforcement officers do not want to engage and arrest young people. But there is nothing in place for anyone else to deal with it. When all the other default measures fail, people dial 911. And the police can't say, well, we're not coming because you guys said you were going to take care of these problems. And no one is dealing with these problems, in my opinion, in a meaningful way that they can deal with the number of problems. I think people had this misconception that changing of the law, raising the age of criminal responsibility to the age of 12, which I don't take issue with. But what was not raised was the resources and the accountability from parents and others on how they are going to deal with these problems, because these young people are still committing what is a criminal behavior. It may not be criminalized, but it is criminal behavior, and they're looking for some type of solution. I know parents are angrier than I've ever seen them when you have to tell them, well, because of this person's age, they're not held criminally responsible. And I'm not sure what the plan is from the school, because there's a lack of communication as to what they're doing, if anything, about this behavior. So I understand the frustration. I'm frustrated myself when I look at this and say we have to have a better solution than we have right now. And realistically, right now, I'm not sure there's many solutions on the table. People are talking about it, but we continue to see the carnage. We continue to see the violence, not just in the schools, but outside the schools with school-age kids. And it's only going to get worse, because at some point they do age out. They get above the age of 12, where they now can be held criminally responsible. Not saying they're going to go to jail, but now the courts can intervene regarding their behavior. So are we setting these kids up for failure when we don't get out in front of the problem? I think those of us who know, who were children ourselves, all of us were at some point, that parental guidance was always the best solution, and that you knew your behavior. When my mom told me that don't let me have to come up to that school, I knew exactly what she meant, and I did not want her to come up to that school. I knew I was going to be in trouble for my behavior to and from school and in the neighborhood. We're not seeing much of that anymore. We're seeing children now making decisions that they should not be making, carrying weapons, some say for their own safety, for their own protection. We're seeing more and more threats to shoot at schools, to shoot up schools by young people. This is real, folks. And, we're seeing a level of frustration in the community. Like I said, these young folks are now emboldened in some instances that no one can tell them what to do. And they're willing to confront law enforcement. They're willing to confront the adults in the schools. They're willing to confront their fellow students. And where's the accountability coming? 617-282-0685, 617-282-0685. You're listening at the round table with Ma'am Leo. Do you think school resource officers should be in schools, or do you think what's in the schools now is working? Boston is taking their school resource officers out of the school. They've replaced them with safety specialists. As you see in Washington, D.C., to their mayor's credit, she's reassessed the situation and said, maybe not so fast, that we don't probably need to be taking what we have as that level of security and protection for our kids out of the schools, because what are we going to replace? We're calling 911. And like you said, there is a level of training that I receive and my coworkers receive to deal with young people, that the officer that receives the radio call doesn't receive that additional training. Yes, they're trained, but they're not trained in a way that SROs are required to by law across the Commonwealth, across the country, by law, that we're required to take to deal with. And it does make a difference. It does make a difference in how you interact with young people, because it prepares you in ways that before I started taking this training, had no idea, had no clue. Just some of the analysis that you learn about the thinking of a young person, and that their maturity at different levels and different stages, that if you're not a parent, sometimes you can't even identify, or if you haven't encountered young people in a regular manner, and you're just looking at it from the law, it's easy to apply the law. But when you go through this training and this person is invested in it, you do see a difference. The number of arrests from SROs is most likely a lot lower than the average police officer that may respond to the same situation, that doesn't have that training and doesn't have that relationship. It does make a difference, because in a time of crisis, people tend to gravitate to people that they know. They'll tend to listen a little bit more to someone that they built a relationship with. Like one of the folks in the interview said, that the officers know these kids. Some of them call him uncle, because they know the relationship. I know there are people that I know, when they see me, they identify with you because they see you on a regular basis. The officer responding to that call might be there on overtime, might be his area, but they're not in the building. They're not there on a consistent basis. They're also the relationships that are built up with the staff there, when in the schools. So there's a lot that goes into being an SRO or a resource officer, that just doesn't take place. And I think if you remove that, I think you're more likely to see more arrests, because the probable cause a lot of times does exist, but it's not treated in the same way. And folks don't understand, and they're not trained. The average officer in the streets are not trained the way school resource officers are in dealing with young people. I think taking them out, you're going to see the calls still come. We see it even with the limited amount of resources that we have here in Boston. There are still calls constantly every day to schools, because the system has collapsed at the school, or it's overwhelmed the system there, and they can't deal with that person, and they're calling law enforcement to come deal with young people that are out of control. This is not just here, this is around the country. And I agree. How do we strike a balance? I'm a firm believer that the school is better equipped to deal with these young people for a behavioral problem, for minor incidents in the school. I'm in total agreement with that. But it doesn't seem like that's what's taking place. They're overwhelmed, because now you have to strike the balances. How much learning is taking place if a teacher or an administrators that are there to deal with their learning process are now constantly spending all their time with behavioral problems. I had no idea of the number of students that we have currently who have IEPs, the individual learning issues, and just wondering, where did all this come from? The lack of involvement as well from parents. You used to have a support from parents. Parents are more likely now to be a part of the problem, unfortunately, and supportive of being combative rather than solution driven. So we've got a lot of work to do here in the city of Boston, but around the country. And like I said, if you're going to replace police officers in these schools, like I said, Boston does not have a school police officers inside buildings. I know Somerville just voted, their city council voted to remove their school resource officers from their building in Somerville. They will no longer be having the officers there. and we'll see what the outcome is. I don't hear a lot about issues in Somerville, so they may be rolling the dice in a manner that may not be counterproductive. But I can tell you from seeing and here in Boston and seeing what's happening with our young people, I don't think it was such a great idea. People were opposed to metal detectors in the school. The number of weapons that are in schools, that are being brought into schools, that are around the schools, there's a need for something. I mean, we have them at City Hall. We have them at courthouses. We have them at the airports. We have them in most public buildings. You can't go to the Fleet Center to see the Boston Celtics or the Boston Bruins without going through a metal detector. You can't go to Fenway Park. You can't go to a concert. It's just the world we live in. It's an added layer of security. It is not punishment. It's not punitive, to have metal detectors. It's the world we live in. And if it stops a weapon from getting into the school, it's a minor inconvenience, in my opinion, rather than the someone being harmed inside the building. We've had shootings in schools. We've had stabbings in schools this calendar year. I mean, things are not good when you're seeing it, firsthand. You're seeing, it was a school the other day in which there were several weapons taken out of the school, and this is a K-8 school. I mean, we're seeing it in real time, folks, and it is impacting our folks. So it is also prohibiting the ability for our young people to learn. It is not producing a learning environment in our schools, and it's across the school. It's not just the mainstream schools. We had several students stabbed at Latin Academy. These are things that are in the public domain. So now that's an exam school, and it's kind of sad when people say, "Oh, these things don't happen in certain schools." They shouldn't happen in any school, So when they happen at what's considered the flagship schools, does it get more attention? Absolutely. It gets more attention. Should it get more attention? Absolutely not. All these schools should be treated equally. But like I said, things are not good on the safety side in the school system, not just here, but around the country. Chicago, Philadelphia, this crime impacting these communities, it spreads into the schools. These kids have issues with each other. It doesn't stay in the school. It comes to school when they come and they confront each other. But Boston is not a large place. And when things are happening here, it spills over into the neighborhoods. We're seeing an increase of young people with weapons here in the city of Boston, across the country. These are school-age students. Are we naive enough to think that if they're carrying weapons outside the school, that they're not carrying these weapons in schools? Who wants to take that chance? I know there was some controversy at the city council here in Boston, in which the white city councilors were in favor of metal detectors back in the school, and the community city councils of color were not in favor of the metal detectors. That it sent the wrong message. What message does it send with weapons in the school and guns and kids being shot and stabbed? What message is that conveying? I'm not sure what is the solution. They just said that what they don't want, but what they haven't said is what we're going to do to make it safe. What's the plan for making it safe? Okay, if you don't want metal detectors, then what is your plan for keeping weapons out of school? We're seeing kids now with more drugs in the school. We had several kids recently, getting in contact with edibles and drugs in the school, coming to school smelling like drugs, weed and things. So we know what's taking place. Are we turning a blind eye to it? And we're wondering why our kids are not learning? I mean, the fact that the state is looking at taking over the school system here in Boston speaks volumes. It's not because of law enforcement that this is being proposed. It is because the learning is not taking place. Again, it is not because of law enforcement that the state is saying, oh, we're going to take it over because the police are not providing safety. They're saying that learning is not taking place here in other places. Houston Texas just announced that they're going to be taking over the Houston school system in that state. So we're seeing this not just here. And if, like I said, these young people grow up, and if we're not turning them around at a young age, all we're going to be doing is producing future people for the criminal justice system in some way. We just had most recently a 16-year-old who was tried as an adult for a stabbing death, alleged stabbing death of a one person and the stabbing of another. This is a person that was impacted. This is a school-aged individual, 16 years old, and sadly still at 16, you can stop going to school. You can drop out at 16 years old. You know, people are complaining about the truancy, that, you know, the number of days that these young people are out of school or they don't go to school and they're hanging in places, in libraries, in food establishment places, just in the community when they should be in school. You know, I think it was a big wake up when COVID hit, and there was a story in the Boston Globe because there was online learning, and they were saying, you know, over 50% of the kids were not logging on to the computers that they had home. The city had provided everyone who wanted a laptop, and kids were not providing. That should have been a wake-up call for parents. If you can't get your child in your home to log on so they can be educated, what do you think these teachers are up against inside the classroom? You know, it's a lot. That's a lot to shake and say. I mean, it's real, folks. So, but again, if you're not going to provide a safe environment, I don't see a lot of learning taking place. You know, I mean, we had at one of the schools here in Boston, one of the high schools, most recently, a stabbing that took place out, and you know, there was video of these kids running for their lives. I think it was 3 or 4 people that were stabbed in that altercation. It's spreading out on the public transportation where these kids are basically taking over, you know, going into businesses and taking over, you know. So I'm not sitting here criminalizing our young people, but I think if we don't get this under control, I'm not saying we should criminalize our young people, no. But we also have to let them know that they have to be accountable, and we have to hold them accountable. And if we're not going to do that in some way, you know, we will. That is going to be that pipeline to prison that people are claiming that is going to take place with just having law enforcement in their area, in their realm. So I want to get your thoughts on it. 617-282-0685. 617-282-0685. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to back in. We're going to continue talking about this. Should SROs continue to operate in schools systems here in the Commonwealth as well as around the country? Some folks are revisiting whether or not they want to take them out. Some folks are going full speed ahead. Who's going to pay the price for that? You know, what is going to be the casualty that says we need to try to find a strike a balance there? So we're going to take a listen to At the Round Table with Manuel. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Anything is possible as long as you work hard. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard. So if I never see ya, never get the chance to meet ya, no, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog.
I wrote 300 songs in 1 year, Boogie will tell you I'm on it. I got unreleased songs for days, they don't want it. Eat any MC in the game, it ain't a challenge. If your music reflects who you are, then you's a coward. I can see through the lies, you ain't living what you spitting. If your money's so long, why your dog's in prison? Why your baby mom's stripping, why your mom's still living in that same broken home that you used to sell piffin'? You ain't gotta lie to me to sell me a track. You ain't gotta rock fake jewels or walk around strap. I respect artists getting money, but love them for spitting crack. And the fact that one track can move a family out the trap. It's a dream for us lost souls brought up in the mix. I'm motivated by the artists coming out in my midst, and the artists that paved the way when I didn't exist. Music's a skyscraper, I'm just trying to add a couple bricks.
This is for the dreamers. They say I am a dreamer, cause I still believe that anything is possible as long as you work hard. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard. Hustle real hard, hustle so if I never see ya, never get the chance to meet ya, no, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog.
I always dreamed I'd be on tour, Instead of laying dealers on the floor, sitting in the hole, knowing I was meant for more. Swear money's its own addiction. Back then I lacked the vision, so every time I went to sleep, it's like I woke back up in prison. To the brothers coming up, keep your nose in the books. Ignore the looks, so you can give back what we took. The 90s taught us that the government is really corrupt, like the Matrix. Choose the red pill and wake up. The feds raided all major cities from Boston to Watts. Took kids out the classroom and put them in general pop. Where are all the black leaders when you really need them? They killed X and Dr. King and left these house Negroes leading. They probably in church praying people act decent. You gotta be willing to die for your beliefs. Ask Jesus.
This is for the dreamers. They say I am a dreamer, 'cause I still believe that anything is possible as long as you work hard. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle so if I never see ya, never get the chance to meet ya, know I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle real hard.
Well, welcome back at the Roundtable with Mamley. I'm your host, Larry Ellison. The Dr. Bradley is off today. The calling number here is 617-282-0685. 617-282-0685. We're discussing whether or not school resource officers should be banned from schools. Some folks have already done that. Some folks are revisiting that. Some folks took them out. Now they're saying they're bringing them back. I know Boston has a different version from they used to have. They used to have school police officers in their buildings. And it was not the Boston police. So folks I know there's some confusion because Boston operates totally different than all the other surrounding cities and towns. In the other cities and towns, their school resource officer is a law enforcement agent from that municipality. In Boston operates as a support system for the former Boston school police who are employees of the Boston public school system. They are no longer in that capacity. They're now considered safety service officers, and that they don't have police powers as they used to, and they're limited in what they can do. And we're seeing a spike in violence in the schools there. And how do we handle this? How do we get this under control? It really dominates a lot of resources with young people here in the city of Boston. And their interaction is actually more with these reforms with law enforcement, because law enforcement is the default. When no one else feels like they can get these young people under control, they dial 911. When they're interrupting businesses, when they're being disruptive in the schools and they can't they dial 911. These are folks that said, hey, we want to reform. We don't think the police are the best ones. We agree. But what they've replaced it with, which was very little, it's not working. So if you have any solutions that can help out, give us a call, 617-282-0685. Good morning, caller. Welcome to the Roundtable.
Good morning, Larry. This is T. Michael Thomas from the People's Academy.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
I'm in the fight.
Oh, good.
I
was listening to a rebroadcast yesterday morning, and it was very good with you and Pastor Wall and Jamal talking about some issues that were germane to what's going on. Yeah, and I know the People's Academy is a solution for our young folks, just like, Roker. There are some solutions for these kids, but the problem, T. Michael, is that we don't need them to get to that point with criminal records because of behavior that, not in all cases, but in most cases, we could get under control.
Absolutely. There's something I wanted to really mention to the listening audience. Mm-hmm. Lately, the past few weeks, I've been invited in to schools outside of our community. And everything Mamleo is saying that's needed in the school system, it's implemented outside of Boston. Why is that?
Can you be specific about what you're talking about? Those implementations.
When it comes to security, when it comes to family interaction, when it comes to the school, the young individuals who's attending school, whereas their careers, their future is aggressively focused on.
Right. So the priority is learning, right? And what we're seeing is, I guess, I don't know if you heard it, was saying in Texas, in Houston specifically, that the state is in the process of taking over the school system. The state here in Massachusetts has threatened to take over here. They've taken it over in other places like Lawrence at one point. The state had took over Lawrence school system. Rhode Island had the same. So we're seeing this in urban communities, right, where the learning is not taking place, right? Is that by chance or is that by happenstance? So whichever one it is, it's not working for these inner cities because we don't. When's the last time you heard of the state or any state taking over a suburban school district?
You don't. That's the point, Larry. You don't hear about it. And
it's not
I have
needed.
to always. I'm sorry?
No, I say it's not needed, right? I mean, we send our kids to the METCO system. Why? Because we want them to be in a safe learning environment.
But Larry, think about this. And I have to always bring People's Academy into the mix. We've been around for over 15 years, simply pushing the trades because it's the key to the middle class. In $1 billion industry, you'll always need a tradesperson. And now you have folks reaching out to me from New Hampshire and beyond to come and just encourage their kids the importance of the trades. When you look at the college intermission right now, for white men, the applications are down, the admissions are down. But in the black community, black women are the highest to sign up for college right now. Black men in the trades or college is non-existent. But the trades right now is booming, and you would think that our elected leaders would say, hey, you know what? We don't personally care for T. Michael, but he has a part solution. Because every other city and state is seeing the importance.
No, I agree with that, T. Michael. But here, I want to go back a little bit here, right? Because the People's Academy requires that someone have the basics learning skills, right? Being able to read and write. Fair to say, right? There are measurements. There's math involved. There are things that involve that you have to. So if our kids aren't getting this, they can't even be handed off to the People's Academy, right? Or it makes it a lot more difficult for you to train someone who hasn't learned the basics in school. Fair to say?
Yes, but we also have a component that will work with them for the literacy part.
Right, and I get that, and I respect that and appreciate that. But what I'm saying is that if someone is of the age where they're at the People's Academy, the fact that you have to have a literacy component says that they failed somewhere else in the public school system. That's the point that I'm trying to make here. It's not that that you have that component and that it's needed, but that should not be what's required for someone at that age group.
Absolutely, and at the same token, too, Larry. I mean, we have reached out to even get involved in the high schools, and we're being rejected.
Yeah. So, T. Mike, what is the response from parents, right? That you, because I told everyone this starts at home, right? I know it's a different era. You know, we're in this high tech, social media era with young people. They're kind of introverts and they don't socialize the way that we used to, actually communicating with each other. But I don't see the parental engagement in a meaningful way with their children.
Agree. Thank you. Absolutely. That, when I first came on the call, that was one of the first things that I sort of touched on. The involvement of the family members. That is a key component. Even if the mother or the father can't make appearances, they should have, whether it's a close family or a family member, to fill that void, that gap. Because in my family, that's what we did. We're not perfect kids.
No.
But for some of my nephews, the teachers thought I was the father.
But also
I was not, but I was called in or called upon by, my older siblings to say, hey, I have to work. I need you to go up there. Boom. Right. I took care of that.
But I'm saying it was not just you. It was, like I said, it was that village concept, right? It was the adults around you. It was your neighbors, right? And your parents told you, and you knew that forcefully when they told you that don't let me have to come up to that school. Now the parents will come up to school and want to be part of the melee, right? I mean, they're not coming up there to solution driven. They're coming up there to get into the fray.
Right. And that's a shame. And this is where I'm saying that we need, like this, you said, like the village concept. As a kid, when you and I went to school, Larry, our neighbors could check us when we're out of line.
That's right.
Someone older than us could check us when we were out of line. That's real.
Right. But there was also a healthy dose of fear and reality in my world that I did not want the school calling my mom. Like these young people now, they go and destroy. Like I've been in numerous meetings where they go into libraries. Now they're being disruptive, where they're disruptive in businesses, in the community, in a way that was not accepted, right, by adults, and that an adult was not afraid to challenge you. And you better not dare talk back to them and let your parents find out that you're being disrespected, to an adult, to your elder.
Unfortunately, that's where the saying comes in. Kids are having kids. And when I see the temperament and the demeanor and the attitude to some of these young parents, man, and your kids is sort of stepping off the curb, and they're like, excuse me, why don't you mind your own business? And I'm like, whoa, I'm just concerned that your child is going to stumble and these crazy drivers, you know what I'm saying, run your kid. I'm just concerned as a human being.
No, you're right. And even to that point, right, even when they're walking with their kids, you're right, they're not even engaged. They're on the telephone, right? They're talking to someone else instead of interacting with that child that just got out of school. How was your day? I always engage my daughter. How was your day? And we go over what her day was like and being involved.
Right. Sit with them.
Right.
Have dinner. Like you said, debrief.
Right.
Do your homework in a professional sit-up, in a professional demeanor, teach them etiquette. That's one of the things that our people is lacking in is etiquette.
Well,
that's real. Like I'm saying, we're not perfect. I'm the most horrible person. However, I try to maintain some type of a respect and professionalism when I'm interacting with folks.
Right, but see, here's the thing is, you didn't consult these people. You can't expect, these folks were not in wherever you were, your bedroom or whatever. When you had this child, you didn't consult with them about how you were going to raise them, right? And now you're expecting someone to spend more time, to do more for your child than your will, to invest more in your child. There is no government program that is going to raise your child. It's just not going to happen. DCF, none of those acronyms are going to raise your child. BPS, BPD, we try to be a support, and that's what these should be, a support, but they are not a replacement for parenting. And you're absolutely right, because I was growing up, someone that was young that had a child, they was shunned in a way. That wasn't something that we celebrated. There was no baby showers for 16-year-olds and reveal parties for 16-year-olds. That wasn't something, because you knew that was life-changing for them, and they weren't ready for the adult responsibility that comes with that. And we're seeing that over the years.
Yes, and the other thing to add to that, Larry, too, one of the things that disappoints me, that some of the parents want to be a friend to their child, and it's like, no, that's not your buddy that you hang with. You have to get into the mindset to teach them respect and to respect others, especially respect people's properties. When I look around and you see a lot of stuff that's tagged, even though because maybe I'm in the construction industry, but still, they take away the value and the beauty, and by the tagging, it diminishes the value of the property that folks hard-earned dollars that was spent on. But that's where it transcends over to the schools. That you walk into some of these schools, and these kids are on their phone and they're sluggish, and no one is addressing it. Why? Because the family members aren't participating in their lives in school. You're right, Larry.
Yeah. So where do you fall in when on this issue of whether or not there should be school resource officers in the schools in general, not just here in Boston, but in general, and metal detectors in buildings?
Larry, if it was up to me, there'll be a metal detectors on the windows going in the bathroom. As soon as you step off the bus, you know, in the parking lot, it's everywhere.
So
because you know why? Like you said it last week, you can't go in any venue today without metal detectors, whether it's Disney, whether it's a game, whether it's the airport, because I'm not flying,
right?
And I'm no punk, but I'm not flying, and I'm thinking someone will bring that plane down. I want that plane to land peacefully.
That's right. That's
no
right.
static.
And to your
Same
point
as in
there, right?
school.
I mean, they're not saying that Mickey Mouse is traumatizing kids by having them walk through metal detectors at Disney,
Right.
Right? I mean, you have to go through there. People pay their money to go. You don't have to go there, but people have to be educated, right? The law says that you can't quit school until you turn the age of 16, which I think is ridiculous that we're allowing people that young who we're saying that their mind doesn't fully develop until around 25, 26, but yet they can decide whether or not they want to go to school. We see a huge issue with truancy, not just here, but around the country.
But people want to have it both ways, because the way I was taught, you go to school to get an education, not for the teacher to raise you or discipline you.
Right.
That's it.
Right. But how do we get away from? Because see, for folks and then say, oh, you know, you're elitist, and you know it's hard. I know it's hard. That's why I didn't have children when I was young, because I know what it took.
Can I answer that, Larry?
Huh?
Then can I answer that?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, if you have an issue with someone disciplining your kid, maybe you should discipline your kids before you send them to school.
But then they tell you, don't tell me how to raise.
The teacher don't have to do it.
Right? They'll tell you don't know. You shouldn't tell you can't tell me how to raise my child. But yet you're telling.
Tell your kid don't act up, because then they need to just kick them out and throw them out.
But then they're telling you, we want you to raise our child, but don't tell me it's the contradictory there. The hypocrisy is that you send your child there to be educated and stuff, but yet you want to tell that person that they can't talk to your child this way. They can't tell your child what to do. Then why is the child there? Right? I mean, and what message are you sending? You're setting them for failure, because no college campus is going to allow that behavior, and you're paying your money to do so, and no employer is going to. Now, Chief Michael, you run a business as well as what you do for the People's Academy. Are you going to hire someone that's going to come there and be a disruptive at the People's Academy? That's not going to listen to...
Larry, thank you. It would not happen. At the People's Academy, the first thing we tell individuals on the intake, come here with your best attitude. Period. Leave with your best attitude. Mm-hmm. We would hope when you're out there, you would continue that. But as long as you come here with the willingness to learn, listen, we listen to you. Leave that attitude outside. Leave that beef outside. We're here to teach you a trade. Mm-hmm. That's it. We're here to guide you on the right path and how you should treat each other and others. But leave that attitude out the door, or else you're done.
I was going to say, why do you do that? I know why. I know the answer. But explain to people why you incorporate that, because you know that if you teach them all the skill sets and they go out there with that bravado attitude, no one is going to employ them, even with the skill set that you've taken. No one wants a problem on the work site. Fair to say?
Absolutely. There was one kid a while ago. We got him into a college, play ball, got him into one of the unions, and he forgot his training. He got into it with the foreman on the job, a little pushing back and forth.
Yeah.
They kicked him out of the union.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
See what I'm saying? Yeah. And we've always taught them, listen, it doesn't matter. You're behind enemy lines. You're there to make a living.
Yeah.
So it can lead to a career. It's nothing personal.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take it personal. For me, my first step, Larry, from the Humphrey Center into the union, when I showed up the first day, a few of those arrogant individuals said to me, "Oh, we're going to get rid of him too." Now, fast forward 5 or so years later, I became their foreman in the shop. Imagine that.
Hey, T. Michael, stand by for a second because folks are waking up. Good morning, Pastor Walker. Welcome to the round table.
Good morning, Pastor listening. Good morning, T. Michael.
Good morning,
you to come by the church, and I haven't seen you yet.
I've been on the road.
Okay, well, the road goes to Framingham as well, but okay.
We will make it there.
All right.
Okay. But that's not why I called. I'm in somewhat of a dilemma, and perhaps you two gentlemen can help me. For some reason, I was watching some of the old film reels that would have been shown in school on different industries and how different things are made, or different, with the teacher, there's like social studies or something would put on these reels because they don't have to teach, and they're 18 to 20 minutes long or whatever, and something became very, very apparent to me. Everybody in the reel was white. In suits or mostly they were white men, and they were in suits, and if they were women, they were dressed in the traditional 50s and 60s female housewife or businesswoman attire. And I was noticing that there were no black people anywhere in these particular movies, and for some reason it bothered me, because were we conditioned not to reach for higher, not to reach for higher because we were never shown examples of higher? Is what I'm saying make sense? And T. Michael, and you have a particular comment on this?
Well, let me before he weighs in.
Go ahead.
Before T. Michael weighs in, I want to bring our other caller in because you sat in this chair. We're coming up to the top of the hour. I'm going to hold this conversation past this hour because I think it's that important. But I'm going to bring Terrence in and hear what he has to say, and then we'll jump on your question. Maybe he has an answer to it as well. Good morning, Terrence. Welcome to the round table.
Good morning to my brothers in the fight.
How you doing today? Morning, Terrence.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What say you?
What say me? First, I want to talk about what you were talking about earlier about these metal detectors in our schools. Some elected officials, they do before they think.
Well, but also, Terrence, they hide behind, literally and figuratively, they hide behind metal detectors. But go ahead.
Exactly. Yeah, because they have metal detectors in the State House and the City Hall.
Right.
So there's metal detectors there to protect you. So why not protect the babies? How traumatized would that be for a metal detector to traumatize a baby than for somebody to come in there with a gun or a knife and do bodily harm to somebody, and they see that?
Right.
That should be more traumatizing than something that's visualize, detecting the metal.
Right. I mean, the number of weapons that I've seen come out of the schools this year alone, is alarming. And then the ones that kids are representing as being weapons that we have to go and check out and make sure what we call a threat assessment that is alarming. It's alarming. This is not an isolated incident. This is not a one-up. And we don't see this. So you can't compare yourself to a school district where the police can really just kind of be there and blend into the scenery, right? Where they're not dealing with the problems that you're dealing with urban schools. Like I said, Houston now is being threatened. Texas is going to take over the school system. Boston is in danger. Lawrence has been taken over. Rhode Island school system was taken over, and you look at it now, it's not much better. So we're seeing this in urban areas that are impacted by this. And I always say, if it's not a safe environment, there's a connection there. There's not much learning, if any learning, going on in these places. Gentlemen, and Dan, you know as well as any of us, we're coming at the top of the hour. If you guys want to hold on, because I want to continue this after the break, but we've got to take our required station break here at the top of the hour. So can you gentlemen hold on?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. You're listening to At the Round Table with Memleo. We're going to take our break, and we'll be right back.
This is for the dreamers. They say I am a dreamer, 'cause I still believe that anything is possible as long as you work hard. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle real hard, hustle so if I never see ya, never get the chance to meet ya, no, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the underdog. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard.
I wrote 300 songs in 1 year, Boogie will tell you I'm on it. I got unreleased songs for days, they don't want it. Eat any MC in the game, it ain't a challenge. If your music reflects who you are, then you's a coward. I can see through the lies you ain't living what you spitting. If your money's so long, why your dog's in prison? Why your baby mom's stripping, why your mom's still living in that same broken home that you used to sell piffin'. You ain't gotta lie to me to sell me a track. You ain't gotta rock fake jewels or walk around strap. I respect artists getting money, but love them for spitting crack. And the fact that one track can move a family out the trap. It's a dream for us lost souls brought up in the mix. I'm motivated by the artists coming out in my midst. And the artists that paved the way when I didn't exist. Music's a skyscraper, I'm just trying to add a couple bricks.